think of Abraham, I think of his narrative, his story. What a man of incredible faith, of trust in God. Not only coming here to the great unknown to tell Beersheba, but as you mentioned, Mount Moriah, nearly sacrificing Isaac, his son. Wow, yes. A portrait of faith here. But such humble beginnings, right, for this man of God?
Yes. He leaves everything.
At least in his prophetic career, humble beginnings, I guess you would say.
Sure, well, let's say he trades all the physical to come to live out here in a tent in the desert.
Amazing.
And become a shepherd.
Yeah. But look, the Abrahamic story wasn't the end of Tel Beersheba's biblical lineage, right? No. What came? Okay, we know about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We mentioned the story of Isaac in the well. Right. Jacob had some pivotal moments here as laid out in the book of Genesis. What came next?
Well, the major point here, there's a period, of course, the Israelites are slaves. This area is not inhabited by the Israelites. But after the return, ultimately, there's a kingdom under David and his son Solomon. And the references all talk about the land from Dan in the north, to Beersheba in the south. So we're at the southern extent of the national boundaries. I use the word boundary rather than border because it's, as I said before, it's not a sharp line. There are no maps in those days.
That's fascinating, by the way. Just as a quick aside, Elliot, the first borders known to mankind were laid out by God himself.
In Joshua, starting in chapter 14. But if you had said from north to south in those days, nobody would have known what you were talking about. So Dan is the anchor of the north, Beersheba is the anchor of the south. And now we have a kingdom. And David essentially defeats the enemies around. Solomon is now building the kingdom. He builds the temple, and he's fortifying the kingdom. This gate is from the time of Solomon, so it's only 3,000 years old.
Is that all?
Well, you know, Eric, what you people in America call history, we call the late modern period. We use centuries as rounding errors. So, yeah, 3,000 years old. But what really makes it interesting to me, its age is nice. But it's identical in design to the gates that Solomon built in Megiddo in the north, in Chatzor in the north. In other words, what we see here is no longer a tribal conglomerate, but a central kingdom that is now taking overall responsibility for the land.
With shared characteristics. The gates are the same.
Exactly. In other words, the orders, the design is coming down from above. And it may have been the same builders, probably not, but the designers are the same, the supervisors are coming from the same school of thought, and they're using the exact same design method. I think it's also important to understand that while Beersheba is mentioned as the southern end, there are fortresses further south. In other words, the edge of the land of Judea, as mentioned even in Joshua, is the wilderness of Tzin, south of us in the Negev, and in that area there was an outpost line of fortresses defending really the edge of what was considered to be the land of Israel. But even then, the influence of the kingdom extended much further south, all the way to the southern tip.
Wow, the golden days for sure, the Davidic dynasty and under Solomon. And it's interesting too, obviously as you've laid out so eloquently, Elliot, borders. Beersheba is mentioned many times in the Bible, often as like a southern point.
Yes.
But it's also mentioned a little bit later on, right? The destruction of Beersheba.
There's a great debate among the archaeologists whether it was destroyed by the Assyrians under Sancheriv or under the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar, during the time of the destruction.
Two nasty guys.
Two very nasty guys, one more successful than the other for themselves.
Yeah.
But it's, I think, an interesting illustration of the fact that we're talking about a discrepancy of about 150 years between them. What's a century and a half between friends? It could have been one, it could have been the other. It was a long time ago. In either case, both major invasions of the land of Israel from Mesopotamia. But that really brings Beersheba to an end during that period.
Yeah, and just a brief mention, Elliot, 2 Kings says that King Hezekiah and his great reforms against pagan idol worship apparently made some reforms here in Beersheba. From Abraham, from the heights of Abraham, the father, it fell into idol worship eventually.
Yes, and they found remnants of an altar, actually used in secondary use in one of the walls, not intact.
Yes.
Because it says that he destroyed them, and this
Hezekiah did, to his credit.
And it matches
Yeah.
It would have not matched, and I'm not surprised that the physical evidence matches the scripture.
Yeah.
But it wasn't found intact. But it shows, I think, also a rather important point that even, and we see this among the Israelites in the desert and beyond, they have to have something physical.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to believe in that invisible, omnipotent God.
Yeah, much easier to just hold this idol
And say, oh, this I get.
But we have the ultimate example of that very trust in that invisible God in Abraham.
Yes.
More than anyone, I think, in the pages of the Bible. That's why it was so special to come here today, Elliot. Wow, to walk on this ancient land here in Beersheba, to think of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. In many ways, this is where it all began. In terms of the people of Israel, the biblical narrative for Jews and Christians. Amazing to be here with you, Elliot. Thank you so much, my friend. We'll do it elsewhere in another amazing place very soon here in the land of Israel. Elliot, thank you. It was great, my friend. Thanks again to our good friend Elliot Chodoff for that fascinating tour through the ancient biblical ruins of Beersheba. Now, Elliot will be back with us next week, but coming up after the break, my final thoughts on why places like Beersheba are so important for building our faith in these Bible times in which we are living. Stick around.